you're trying to catch up on what happened at the Emmys last night, we are here for you. The Pit and the Studio were two of the big winners, winning Best Drama and Best Comedy. And the White Lotus was almost completely shut out, despite having 23 nominations. I'm Amil Niazi, sitting in for Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This is Commotion. We've got Roxana Hadadi and J. Kelly Nestruck, who very kindly stayed up late watching the Emmys for us last night. Thank you so much, and welcome back to Commotion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's start with the Pit. I'm a big Pitt fan, real big Pitt household where I live. So I was very excited when it won Best Drama. And leading up to the Emmys, you know, there was a lot of conversation about sort of the Pit and Severance. You know, Severance being this very prestige, big budget drama on Apple TV Plus, and then the Pit, sort of this throwback. It's a medical drama that harkens back to like the days of ER and being the biggest network television show. Kelly, how did you feel about the Pit walking away with one of the biggest awards of the night?
Oh, well, I was excited about it personally. You know, I do really admire Severance and I'm immersed in the story, but I'm worried it's going to end up one of these shows that the third, fourth season will just completely stop making sense altogether. Whereas the Pit for me was, you know, a show that had a fresh, you know, real time take on the ER drama, and basically I was in tears every single episode.
Same.
I thought it was so beautifully crafted, so emotionally resonant, and so spoke to the time. It talked about COVID. You know, that's something we never hear anyone talking about on TV or actually showing, and the trauma of that period, especially among healthcare workers, it really dove into that.
Yeah, so the Pit, it's basically like every episode is 1 hour in this ER, and they tackle everything from COVID to you know, shootings, and it just really did seem to capture this moment in America that was really interesting. But Roxana, it also seemed to capture kind of this conversation around like which way TV is heading, you know, whether it is going to have this resurgence of network television. You know, what do you think about that?
Yeah, it's funny because we're talking about network television, but it is still on cable, right? It is still like on a streamer. But I do think it is an interesting sort of case study for Severance being this show that I think we know cost hundreds of millions of dollars and took many years to come out. And so there is this sort of prestige, almost cinematic way that we have learned to consume this show. Whereas the Pit, right after season 1, went back into their writer's room. Season 2 is coming in January. Like, I think for the TV industry, the Pit really is what they want, right? Something consistent, something that viewers can also rely on. So there definitely is a little bit of like behind the scenes, I think, meta text to the Pit winning, which is really interesting. Whereas Severance, like, I agree with Kelly. Part of me is like, first, are we going to get this third season in a recognizable amount of time?
Yeah.
And are people going to care? And I think that's really something that is like, time is paramount in the TV industry. And if you wait too long, I think people don't care anymore. So I think a lot of recognizing the Pit was also recognizing like, this is how TV used to function. And we want to model that for the future as well.
Yeah, one of the tricky things about Severance was season 1 came out, it landed in this big way where people were talking about how inventive it was. And then we had to wait so long for season 2 that probably a lot of people sort of fell off and forgot about what even happened. So I'm glad you brought that up. And I'll just quickly mention that, you know, Noah Wyle picked up the Emmy for Best Actor in a Drama, Catherine Lanasa, Best Supporting Actress, and Britt Lauer and Tramell Tillman from Severance also picked up some big acting awards. So they did have a lot of wins in that conversation. The Studio also had a very big night. That is the sort of like love letter to Hollywood, starring Seth Rogen. It's a comedy. Here is Seth Rogen picking up the Emmy for Best Actor in a Comedy.
I so could not wrap my head around this happening that I literally prepared nothing. I've never won anything in my life. When I was a kid, I bought a used bowling trophy at an estate sale. And my parents were like, yeah, that's a good idea. You should probably buy that.
I mean, that's classic Seth Rogen. So self-deprecating, so sweet and funny. He actually went on stage 3 more times after picking up that Emmy. He won for directing, producing, and writing. And every time he seemed very surprised to win. Kelly, were you expecting the studio to win as many Emmys as it did? It really kind of dominated the night as far as comedies go.
Yeah, well, it had done really well at the Creative Arts Emmy Awards the weekend before. So I think Seth Rogen was the only one who was surprised last night, to be up there over and over and over. Everyone else was predicting that. And it's a good show, obviously. It's very stylish as well. And it's take on Hollywood is satirical, but not too satirical. It's sort of like chummy, exec-friendly comedy about making movies. And and it's generally funny. There's some great episodes. I love the one with Sarah Polley, who's apparently joined the writer's room for next season, which is kind of exciting. So no, it wasn't a big surprise.
And Sarah Polley, a Canadian, obviously Seth Rogen, Canadian. And, it's not a Canadian show, but of course we're always cheering on our fellow Canucks. Kelly, any other big Canadian Emmy winners last night?
Well, Seth Rogen's creative partner, Evan Goldberg, should of course be mentioned. He's the co-creator of the studio, and he was up there for 3 of those awards that Seth co-won, for directing, for writing, and producing. And the 2 of them are working on a show for Crave and CTV up here soon too. So they're not totally out of the Canadian sphere, which is nice. So I'm looking forward to what they're doing. The showrunner of The Pit is a secret Canadian. He grew up in Ontario. He's from Ontario, started in the business up here. R. Scott Gemmell. He had the last word of the night, thanking healthcare workers. And I think that show has his, I grew up with public healthcare perspective on the American healthcare system, sort of embedded underneath everything. And then Lorne Michaels was up on stage accepting the award for SNL's big 50th anniversary special, which won for Outstanding Variety Special.
Yeah.
So, he's another, we had different generations of sort of Canadian talent that works in the U.S. or creative brain drain down to the U.S., whatever, however you want to spin it. Exactly. But it was a big night. Yeah.
Moving on to sort of one of the big surprises, Roxana, was the White Lotus. This was one of the most nominated shows, but it only won 1 Emmy, and that was for the theme music. I mean, it's great theme music, but I'm sure that that Mike White was really surprised to have lost so much. And it really especially dominated the acting categories. Supporting acting had 7 of the 14 slots. And Roxana, you wrote for Vulture about kind of how the Emmy rules should change around that, preventing, you were watching and as they announced the nominees, it was just like White Lotus, White Lotus, White Lotus. And it seems not just unfair, but unfair to the actors involved. Why do you feel strongly that this should change?
Well, my selfish motivation is because I love Andor very much, and I was shocked that none of the Andor ensemble made it in.
Yeah.
So that was my small personal grievance. But I've written about this twice. I wrote about it for a previous White Lotus season. I wrote about it again now. And my frustration with these ensemble shows is I think that they honestly flatten the work of the actors, because I think that people look at it as an ensemble and think well, everyone should get nominated, right?
Yeah.
And I do think that has sort of a little bit of an unfortunate effect where then you have what's happening now, where I think you get a little bit of backlash and you sort of get a divided vote. Maybe people liked the show, but maybe they think oh, well, 4 people got nominated. Why would I vote for this?
Yeah.
And to be fair, the studio also did this in that they dominated the guest actor category with sort of all these actors playing themselves. But I do think it is sort of a larger cyclical problem with the White Lotus. And I genuinely was very shocked that none of these actors made it through. But I think ultimately, unfortunately, they sort of split the vote.
Yeah.
But I would really love to change this because I do think that there are so many shows out there, right? So many actors, so many people who could be nominated and recognized. And I don't necessarily think that just because you're on one sort of large, buzzy ensemble show that all of you should get nominated. There's just something about that I am just continuing to kick against. And I'm wondering if this was the turning point now, because again, the fact that none of these actors won was legitimately very shocking, I think.
Yeah, it was shocking. I mean, the White Lotus didn't win a lot of the big awards. Just very quickly, why do you think that it did get shut out in that way?
I think that what Kelly was saying about how urgent the pit felt is a really key motivator here. I mean, again, this show talked about COVID, it talked about measles, it talked about like sort of our collective trauma. And I think something that is very important that we sort of don't talk about is like dramas that feel important do well.
Yeah.
And I really think the pit felt important in a certain way that really helped jettison it. I also think that it was a stronger season of television than the White Lotuses. And so there's part of me that is actually very pleased that people recognize that as well.
Well, I mean, speaking of shows that really captured the conversations going on right now, Kelly, I want to talk about Adolescence, another big winner from the night. It won Best Limited Series, and 3 actors from the show won Emmys, including the young star Owen Cooper, who won for Best Supporting Actor. Such a sweet speech. He was so good in that show. And the conversation was really about male violence, especially amongst teen boys, and sort of what's pushing some of them into this like almost radicalization. Kelly, what did you think about the show, and do you feel it was inevitable that it would have won because of what Roxana is talking about, because it sort of captured that conversation that's going on right now?
Well, I'm raising 2 boys, so it really hit home for me. But as it did so for so many viewers, of course, I think what was astonishing to me about the show is I kept describing it to people and saying this is one of the best, TV series that I've seen, one of the best miniseries I've seen in a very long time. But when I said what the premise was, people said, well, I'm not going to, it sounds too intense, I'm not going to watch it. And yet it did extremely well for Netflix. It's one of the most watched things it's ever produced. So people, I think there's this appetite actually among viewers for TV to grapple with the real world and with what's going on in the world right now. And we see that with The Pit, and we see that again with Adolescence winning all these awards. I don't think there's been a more impactful bit of television in the last year, certainly. I've been tempted to sign that smartphone pledge that, the creator, Jack Thorne, one of the creators, Jack Thorne, was sort of saying, you should keep smartphones away from your kids until they're at least 14 years old or something like that. And it's come up in the British Parliament as well. And the manosphere is, something that we continue to talk about. It's, negative influence on young men. So, yeah, I think, but there's a lot of social issue related TV series out there that don't have the same wallop that this one did, or that just aren't as great art as this was. The whole Wonder thing that was done in the studio was very stylish, but here it really was the form underlining the content, which is to say that, you have one chance to raise your kids, you have one chance to grow up. And you could make a wrong decision. How can you avoid doing that?
Yeah, I mean, the other thing was that it was all one shot, right? So it had this sort of artistic buzz, but then it did have that weight of the content. Roxana, very quickly, I know you had sort of mixed feelings about the show. What did you think about it picking up so many Emmys?
I wasn't surprised. I agree. Technically, it's incredibly impressive. I think the performances across the board are astonishing. It's really impressive to me that Stephen Graham won for his acting performance here when he's basically in like 2 of 4
he's
episodes.
Barely in it, yeah.
He's barely in it, but I think that really showed how much people respected the work. My slight frustration is just that I think in all of this, and sort of the conversation about like male loneliness and radicalization, we forget that there is a girl that was killed in this story. And my issue is I wish that the series had done more with that character and with sort of making her life feel as worthy as the young boys. But I mean, solidly created show.
Yeah. I got to move on now to Stephen Colbert, who, had a standing ovation last night. People were thinking he would get political because The Late Show with Stephen Colbert was canceled by CBS. They said it was about money, but a lot of people wondered if it was because he's been so outspoken in criticizing Paramount, the parent company of CBS. He won for Outstanding Talk Series. Here he is accepting the Emmy.
10 years ago, in September of 2015, Spike Jones stopped by my office and said, hey, what do you want this show to be about? And I said, Spike, I don't know how you could do it, but I'd kind of like to do a late night show, a late night comedy show that was about love. And I don't know if I ever figured that out, but at a certain point, and you can guess what that point was, I realized that in some ways we were doing a late night comedy show about loss. And that's related to love, because sometimes you only truly know how much you love something when you get a sense that you might be losing it. And 10 years later, in September of 2025, my friends, I have never loved my country more desperately. God bless America. Stay strong, be brave, and if the elevator tries to bring you down, go crazy and punch a higher floor. Woo!
Quite the speech. Kelly, what did you think about what he had to say?
Well, he got 2 standing ovations last night. As soon as he came out, he was the first presenter of the evening too, which I thought was interesting that they had him do that. So even if he, I think everyone is in the TV industry in the United States must be feeling, the political pressure upon it to, especially in the news divisions and especially in, this late night sphere. It's not a normal situation to have a president who is gloating about the firing of a late night host and calling for the firing of others. This is not a healthy media environment. It's not a healthy state of, freedom of speech down there, freedom of expression. So, of course, I thought Colbert was going to win this award this year. And I thought his speech was very beautiful. I feel for everyone down in the States that's having to work through this time. And that was under the undercurrent for a lot of the evening, I felt like, but I was surprised that there were maybe fewer open political remarks, but then I'm not that surprised because you could end up getting fired. You could end up getting blacklisted for what you say these days.
Yeah. Well, Roxana, quickly, I just want to mention that, it was surprising that we didn't hear a lot of politics at all, really, except for Hannah Einbender, who, when she won for Best Supporting Actress for Hacks, sort of, denounced ICE, said Free Palestine. She also said Go Birds, talking about the Philadelphia Eagles. But, certainly, are you surprised that there wasn't a lot of mention of politics? I have about 30 seconds for you there.
I think the show was set up so that people didn't say anything. Because from the very beginning to say, look, it's very nice that this countdown meter was to support the Boys and Girls Club. But fundamentally, I think what the show was saying was like, don't speak too long and don't think that you have the opportunity to say something political because we're going to cut you off.
Yeah.
So I think that sort of panopticon was there from the beginning of the show. And I do agree. I mean, we have seen people lose jobs. We have seen people be denied opportunities. So honestly, it was far more impressive to me that Hannah did say something than it was surprising that more people didn't, unfortunately.
Yeah, I should just explain that countdown clock. Host Nate Bargatze sort of mentioned in the beginning that he was going to donate $100,000 to the Boys and Girls Club, but for every second that a winner went over 45 seconds, that $1,000 would come out of that pot. They ended up donating the money anyways. But all to say, it was an interesting night. I really appreciate both of you coming on and talking to us. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Roxana Hadadi is a TV critic at Vulture, and J. Kelly Nestruck is a TV critic with The Globe and Mail. Thank you so much for listening about the Emmys.